So, traditional Jewish, Christian, or Muslim.
Oh, this is a good start. Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Holy Watermelon Podcast. I'm Katie.
I'm Preston.
And what are we talking about today?
What are we talking about?
I mean, I did all the research for this episode, so I should probably introduce it. We are talking about
Para-religion and religion as pop culture.
Pop culture as religion is the topic, but religion in pop culture will definitely come up. I think it's unavoidable. We also, I'm just going to say, we have a third co-host. That's my dog. So if you hear snorts or jingles, that's her. That'll just help with editing if you just know she's here. All right. So let's get started, I guess. When I was researching this, I found a term I had never actually heard before, which was para-religion, and I thought that described what we're talking about really well. And its definition is a secular belief system having certain aspects of religion, but not all aspects of religion. So then I had to look up what religion was, because if you heard our last few episodes, nobody knows.
Yeah, I think the things we covered in the last two episodes lend themselves very easily to the discussion of para-religion.
Yes, and yes, all the talk arounds, I guess, of what religion is and what gods are basically fall under para-religion. So formal religion has a belief in supernatural powers, some influence over life, rituals, and ceremonies. And so a para-religion would be missing some of those things. So this is where pop culture comes in, and that could be your para-religion, whether that's sports, a celebrity, your favorite TV show, media.
Celebrities, media.
Is just like a big, that covers all. YouTube and books. And
all these people worshiping PewDiePie.
I mean, I think we all have our favorite YouTubers, so.
Well, yeah, I think if you spend enough time on YouTube, you definitely have somebody that you're going to keep going back to.
It's true. Like the Holy Watermelon Podcast.
Right? Like and subscribe. Give us 5-star reviews.
Oh, we're getting better at this. Maybe we should start our conversation with why people worship pop culture like religion, and maybe some similarities and differences in what that looks like. I mean, you wrote a paper on this.
I did, and I didn't actually explore the why in the paper that I wrote, but I just tried to illustrate a whole bunch of things and said, see, haha, these people are definitely religious in their reverence for these fanaticism.
Things.
Yeah, sports fanaticism is a great example. It helps bind communities together. You go to a hockey game and you're in a stadium filled with people who are super excited to be there, to participate together and love screaming. They'll usually, well, I can't say usually.
That's how they worship.
Right? There's an awful lot of getting dressed up in the uniform of your favorite player.
War paint.
Absolutely. There's loads of war paint. I think probably more in football games than hockey games, but I see a lot more hockey jerseys on the train in hockey season than I see football during football season.
We're also in Canada, so
right.
That skews it.
CFL is not a big deal. I actually have friends who have been professional football players, but not here in Canada.
So yes, people celebrating their pop culture choice can look a lot like worship.
Absolutely. There's, if you look at the cosmic duality that's present in an awful lot of the big religions, there's good and evil. It's usually the way it's simplified. And it's super easy to see rival teams like the Rangers and the Islanders. If you like one, the other one is not likely to be anything other than the rival, the evil. And that's a little bit religious.
Yeah.
Kind of.
The other, yeah.
Yeah.
Us against them.
Absolutely.
But, I didn't put this in the show notes, but I'm actually reminded of the book that I read for the first episode called
In the Beginning.
No, The Faith Instinct.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, yes, our first episode is called In the Beginning, but the book was called The Faith Instinct, and it talks about how humans are programmed to be religious. And I think that this is probably one of those whys.
I
That
think
answers
so.
the question of the why, is that we feel compelled to be part of a community.
Yeah. And a community that is bound together by a belief in something, even if that belief is as simple as our team's going to win. I remember in V for Vendetta, there was the mantra of the Chancellor of strength through unity, unity through faith. And that faith can be literally anything.
Wow,
A
what a
general
great
trust or belief.
Example from pop culture.
Right. It's like I studied this a little bit.
Weird. It's like we're talking about pop culture and religion. We're such dorks.
Yeah, but it's okay.
Right? I feel like sports is kind of its own beast, especially team
Absolutely.
sports. And there's often a standout player. You know, we have the Michael Jordans and the Wayne Gretzkys. But often it's a team sport. And maybe it's because I'm not a sports fan, but I can't separate out one player from another. Sorry, guys.
They're just blurs on the screen.
They're just blurs on the screen. They shoot their puck into hoops in different quarters. I don't know. That was purposely bad. I know a little bit more than that. But
Go sports, do the goal.
to the goal. Pickers are number one. But so I would separate sports a little bit from books, movies, and television, because books, movies, and television often have a protagonist. I won't say they always have
and
a
they're
protagonist.
fiction. Sports are straight up real.
That's true. Quidditch.
People play Quidditch.
That's true.
I mean, it started out as a fictional, terribly nonsensical game that turned into somehow a thing that people actually do.
Still nonsensical.
Yes.
That's true. But anyway, I'm just being a brat. But there are fictional sports too, Preston.
Yes, there are.
But you're right.
But we don't revere the sports heroes for their sports achievements in these fictional stories. We revere Harry Potter, for example, not because he's a great seeker, but because he took 7 or 8 years to beat Voldemort.
Wow. What a great segue into talking about what a Christ figure is. I don't know if you planned that. We're silly today. So I was reading another book to get ready for this, and good book, not really what I thought it was going to be at all. It'll definitely be helpful later on, but I was reading Jesus, Potter, Harry, Christ, and it talks about the parallels between two literary characters. It's not really a comparison of Jesus and Harry Potter, but they did provide a really great definition of what a Christ figure is. So I'm going to read that. A Christ figure is simply a literary referent used to identify a fictional character that seems to symbolize Jesus Christ in a significant way, such as through the endurance of suffering, a sacrificial death, or a perceived rebirth or a resurrection. Many literary figures have been called Christ figures by various researchers, including Ahab of Moby Dick, Gandalf or Frodo Baggins of Lord of the Rings, or Galahad in The Grail Quest. So that's where I separate movies and TV and books a little bit, is because we have these Christ character figures that don't necessarily appear in real world sports.
And we appreciate them. Why? Because they're awesome stories.
They are awesome stories.
Actually, that's a hotly contested statement regarding Harry Potter, but there's an awfully
Only because
large
of your
following of Harry Potter because they're absolutely enjoyable stories, whether or not you think they're academically good.
I mean, that's a different discussion
It
for
is.
a different podcast. I think the conversation I want to have around Christ figures is, why is it interesting? Is it interesting because we've heard this story for 2,000 years? And I honestly don't know, and I didn't think to look into it. Is there a non-Judeo-Christian equivalent of Christ figure? Or is this further, this deep dive that I don't necessarily want to go into today? If you do have a Christ figure from another religious group? Is it just because it's an even older story than we realized? I've answered my own question. Comments, thoughts, concerns.
In my excitement for developments in the Marvel Universe,
Ooh, good
I've
one.
done a little bit of looking into this new announced TV show. It's on Disney Plus probably like 2 or 3 years from now, called Moon Knight.
Mm-hmm.
Character I know very little about, but I did some wiki reading, and he's this Jewish fella, or half Jewish or half Jewish, who his dad is a rabbi, and he's out as a mercenary. He's a very scary, dangerous fella, and he experiences this death or near-death experience in, I want to say, Egypt. I'm going from memory from a Wikipedia article that summarizes probably more than one version of the story.
That's a good source.
Right? But, when I'm just casually looking into my pop culture learning and expectations, Wikipedia is an okay place to go to manage expectations, maybe. And he is approached by this Egyptian god who brings him back from this near death or maybe full death to be almost himself a deeply deranged Christ figure. Christ figures can come in a lot of different flavors. Usually they tend to be non-threatening, very positive savior figures.
And I guess the point we should clarify is I was reading about Christ figures on Wikipedia.
Because Wikipedia.
I mean, Wikipedia is so easy. And it says that they need to... it's very broad. Almost anyone can be a Christ figure. So I don't even know if it's a great definition. Or like you could argue that someone is a Christ figure very easily. So it says the character might display one or more of the following traits. One or more. Performance of miracles, manifestation of divine qualities, healing others, displaying kindness and forgiveness. Right there, I'm already a Christ figure. Fighting for justice, being guided by the Spirit of the Father, character, and the character's own death and resurrection.
Simba.
Right, so, I mean, Simba, healing others, like literally any doctor character you could argue is a Christ figure, because, I mean, if
they're playing out any one of the stories in the Bible that center around Jesus doing a thing, then it's very easy to argue that they're a Christ figure.
So what about the Christ figure story is so appealing? 2,000 years being retold and retold and retold and retold.
We all love a hero.
Mm-hmm.
That's just the way it goes. And if you don't love a hero, that says something about your character that I don't want to dive into at this particular
probably
moment.
Probably a sociopath. I mean, seriously, like at bare minimum, you're probably a sociopath.
Probably.
Yeah.
No judgments. We need sociopaths to keep
Preston's wife.
Things going.
She never likes the hero.
She likes some heroes, but there's plenty of villains that she finds absolutely fascinating and really latches onto. But we all generally love a hero, and a hero that we can feel some sort of familiarity with actually helps a lot. And familiarity can be achieved in a lot of different ways. If he's from your hometown, like Deadpool is from Saskatchewan.
Like the actual character of Deadpool.
The character of Deadpool is from Saskatchewan. Okay,
that's why I always like Wolverine, because he's from Alberta.
Right. Wolverine's from Alberta. Ryan Reynolds, I think, is actually from BC.
Yes.
I think. Not that I, have learned the home countries of all of the superheroes ever. That would be dreadfully boring to study up on for the long term.
But
that's fair.
A different person.
It takes all kinds to make the world go round, right? So familiarity in that way is easy enough to accomplish. Another way of familiarizing yourself with, or familiarizing the hero of your story to your audience, is to make them seem like something that they're already aware of. And Jesus is pretty ubiquitous around the world.
He's the everyman.
In some ways. He's definitely well known, at least in part. Like, there's an awful lot of people who say they're Christian who straight up don't know Jesus, but they're aware of Jesus in at least a few stories.
That's what I
And so that familiarity, having a Jesus-type hero in your story, helps to familiarize the audience with the hero.
I have a follow-up question, and my brain doesn't quite know what it is.
So I think that's the why, anyway.
This might be diving down a rabbit hole. Do you need to have some awareness of Jesus to appreciate these stories? Or is the story of Jesus based on the every story as well?
That's the great question, isn't it? One of my favorite heroes who's called a Jesus figure is Superman.
Yep, that was one that came
Almost
up
all Christians will say Jesus and Superman, basically the same guy. There's a couple of reasons why I really don't like that statement. Number one is Superman was written by a couple of Jews who definitely would have been familiar with Christian lore. Like, one of the creators was a Canadian from Toronto. One of them was an American. They met up in Cleveland, I'm pretty sure, and they threw together this great story after a few other ideas that weren't really working out. And they lived in a world where Jesus was absolutely a real present thing, but if you look at the Superman story that they wrote, there's no Jesus there at all. It's all Moses.
Interesting. And that was, I get what I sort of talked around earlier of other religions. And because we're in North America and a Judeo-Christian world, are there Moses figures or, Buddha figures or Muhammad figures? Like, we talk about the Christ figure and it's very easy to find. But maybe that's just because we're in North America, and whether you're Christian or not, you just societally you grow up with it, and it's easy to find it. And I don't even know if it's easy to find because people are purposely relating to the Bible, or if it's just actually good story writing.
That's the great question, right? I like that you brought up a potential of a Buddha figure. Made me immediately think of The Matrix. I remember when it came out, and ever since, everyone's like, Neo is the awesome Jesus figure in the story. He's absolutely messianic. But he actually feels to me more like a Buddha figure. He becomes enlightened, though, he also has a guide, but he doesn't rely on his guide very much either. Which, there's absolutely a perfectly decent argument that he's a Jesus figure. There's several books on the subject that point that out. And I just happen to feel that he's more of a Buddha figure.
So while we're talking about it, before we sort of move on to the next part that I want to talk about, this is storytelling format as described by one of my favorite writers, Donald Miller. He writes books on business writing. And I use this frequently in my work. So storytelling format. A character. Who's your favorite character?
Let's go with Luke Skywalker.
Has a problem.
Yeah, he does. He hates tending to dehumidifiers on a desert planet.
Who meets a guide
Yeah, old Ben Kenobi.
that gives him a plan.
Yeah, go fight the Empire. Here's your dad's lightsaber.
Calls them to action.
Yeah, that.
Yeah. Cool. There's probably a little more with the Republic and shit, but which
Join the rebellion.
Yeah.
Go save Princess Leia because here's a mission.
leads to a success,
Yeah, they actually get her off the Death Star.
and it avoids a failure.
Yeah, she didn't get killed.
Mm-hmm. And the character transforms.
Yeah, Luke becomes a Jedi. Or, well, kind of. He slowly becomes aware of the Force and does use it.
This is very much a New Hope, Luke Skywalker.
Yes.
Yes.
Well, I'm definitely
if you do
basing
it
all this on the
across
original.
it's
We can
across-
definitely stretch this out further.
Right, but we could storytelling format easily can do that with Jesus
Oh, yeah.
or basically anyone else. Like I said, any good story. Once you know this, I was literally watching Lord of the Rings when Preston came. So Frodo has the ring, meets Gandalf, joins the Fellowship, goes to Mordor, tosses the ring in the fire, avoids the destruction of the world, and Frodo is a happy little hobbit again. Actually, he's
Minus
not.
a finger.
Minus a finger and a whole bunch of points. He's actually not a happy little hobbit again. He's deeply traumatized and
Yeah.
has to go across the sea. That's his character transformation.
Yeah, the book is different than the movie.
It's been Bryant and I were talking about this. It's been so long since I've read it. I actually have no frame of reference for book to movie anymore.
Yeah, so
Sorry.
I took a whole course on the works of Professor Tolkien through college, and it was pretty enjoyable. We started with the Silmarillion, moved through The Hobbit and Lord of the Rings, and that's actually all we covered of his writings. And I really enjoyed the Silmarillion first couple of chapters, and then it got really hard to keep reading. I skimmed half of The Hobbit, and then when it came to Lord of the Rings, I was so burnt out that I just, when I had to write something about it, I would look through the movie to find where in the book I would find the information I needed, and then read that chapter in the book. So I know more or less how the story ended in the book. Remember very little because I was skimming it looking for something. I just know that it is a lot more bleak and sad than the end of the movie was.
Maybe when I finish Jesus Potterhead Christ, I'll go back to Lord of the Rings and read that over Christmas. Well, what a lovely wormhole that was. So, I have some examples of pop culture as religion, and I really wanted to keep this episode on pop culture as religion, not religion in pop culture, but I think that'll be hard.
There's definitely some blend in this Venn diagram
really,
in the mind.
The reason I wanted to stay with pop culture as religion is because religion in pop culture is infinite, and we could talk for hours basically just reiterating that everyone's a Christ figure.
Right. That's not what we want to do.
So there's a couple examples I wanted to talk about. I mean, I guess, is it healthy or not? And if there's a problem with worshiping pop culture or treating pop culture as religion. So just keep that in mind. So 2 examples that kind of tie in together, both of which I love, is there's a Bob's Burgers episode, and we're both Bob's Burgers fans, where the kids try to save an aquarium and they turn it into a church. And then there's also a John Oliver Last Week Tonight episode that I highly recommend. And
I love it.
So good. He's talking about televangelists and seed faith, so he actually turns his show into a registered religion with the IRA, so it can be tax exempt and he can take donations.
It's weird that more companies don't do this. Like in Bob's Burgers, they set up the aquarium to be a religion. We could totally take that model and just build up the Temple of the Shark, have basically, why am I blanking on the name of the big water park down in San Diego?
Like Sealand?
Like Sealand. Is that what it's called?
SeaWorld?
SeaWorld. It's called SeaWorld.
We're
We
Canadians.
We could totally set up a thing like SeaWorld, probably in a place with a warmer climate than we have, and set it up as the Temple of the Shark. Call it a religion. If you want to come and visit the park, you have to offer a sacrifice, usually in the form of dollars, let's be real.
Oh, is that sounds often like an admission fee.
Right? But it's not. It's a sacrifice to the gods of the sharks. Come and check it out.
Well, I mean, that's a great idea.
Somebody's going to beat me to actually making this a real thing.
Well, I don't actually know I've tried to find it and I can't find what the CRA's rules are on religion, but I hope our congregants, subscribers, care to make a donation to our Patreon so that we can register as a religion. And we'll wear giant watermelon on our heads.
Sure.
I think.
Absolutely. You dry out a watermelon and it's not going to get real gross.
Perfect.
And it could be a perfectly reasonable hat.
I just thought we'd make it a felt, but I like the cut of your jib. So, obviously, the Bob's Burgers episode is fiction, but John Oliver actually turned his show into a registered religion. Is there a problem with that?
Is there?
I'm asking you.
That depends on how you want to evaluate a religion. As far as dangerous religions go, I don't think Last Week Tonight counts as a dangerous religion. Is it an abuse of the tax code? Maybe. But
Should the tax code be better?
the tax code should absolutely be better. We got way too many people who make way more money than I do, paying less taxes than I do. And I haven't paid taxes in years.
He's been a student, everyone. Just like
Yeah, I'm not a tax evader.
He's not evading taxes.
I just have not legally been required to pay taxes in a long
Everyone's
time.
gonna be like, "Who's this lazy motherfucker?"
I have only recently qualified myself to be a host on this podcast.
You're more qualified than me.
No, that's not true. There's a reason there's two of us. We can't just have one person who's educated and call that a podcast.
Right. So whether or not something's a legally registered entity with whatever tax place, that's where am I looking? Tax department? Paige, stop making mouth noises.
Yeah.
Taxation hammers of your country. Is there a point where worship of media or, let's say, celebrities is dangerous? What taking your like or love of something to a worship beyond level?
I suspect, with no personal experience in this department, that there is somebody who genuinely believes in at least the possibility of a real-life Cthulhu.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a thing that approaches religion. And because Cthulhu is a dark, maddening character in the writings of H.P. Lovecraft, that could bump up against dangerous, potentially.
I even mean so much as liking How I Met Your Mother too much. Right? Is there... I don't know what that looks like. Maybe the producers of How You Met Your Mother have a crazy fan encounter that they want to email me about. But is there a benefit to worshiping something to that level? That, again, that's a pure religion, not your typical religion.
I'd say there's a benefit.
And,
a community.
And is there a point where it's dangerous? So again, like How I Met Your Mother, the Harry Potter books.
Let's go with My Little Pony.
My Little Pony. Orlando Bloom.
Sure. The reason My Little Pony came to mind is because you've got a strong following of people who are super committed. And I've had friends who really love My Little Pony. There's absolutely some good stories that are absolutely worth sharing with your children.
Is there a Christ figure in My Little Pony?
I don't know My Little Pony well enough, but I suspect strongly that there is. But that is a uninformed suspicion, or at least underinformed. And what I do know is that there is... Well, you're familiar with Rule 34, yes?
Mm-hmm.
My Little Pony has some scary...
Oh, no.
Scary contributions to the internet.
Oh, no.
And that is because of the religious or almost religious or para-religious following of this media.
Well,
I mean, the little plastic toys that you get your kids, not terribly sexual, but...
Are they sexual at all?
To some people, they are. If people are into what they're into, and though I'm not going to kink shame somebody,
fair.
I do believe that there is a line where you do need to change your behavior.
I guess if you're not hurting anyone, including yourself.
Or other animals that often people don't feel comfortable considering as having feelings or feeling pain.
Anything that's sentient, don't hurt it.
What's the line for sentient?
Doesn't have a personality.
Absolutely. I think that's a pretty decent criteria.
Oh, good.
If you want to follow those rules that you have set, then that's a perfectly good criteria to meet that.
So if your para-religion doesn't hurt anything sentient, I think it's fine.
Yeah, that's fair.
Including yourself, everyone. So
Yeah, if your religion
If you have
hurts
like a
you,
weird shrine that you spend all your time at and you don't eat,
problems.
problems. Yeah. How has religion absorbed pop culture, and religion intentionally or unintentionally can give greater meaning to media? I don't know which one of those two points you want to talk about.
They're both kind of big questions.
Maybe we'll end with how has religion absorbed pop culture, and then we can talk about some of our favorite examples of
Sure.
Christ figures or Bible stories that are like Harry Potter.
Religion absorbing pop culture. There's an awful lot of Christians today compared to the very few Christians 2,000 years ago who actually believed in the figure of Lilith, who is, in any story that deals with a hell and a devil and the idea of angels in pop culture that I'm aware of, there is a Lilith figure who, in old rabbinic writings, was Adam's first wife before Eve in the Garden of Eden, who was not a great wife, who would not submit herself to Adam, and so was cast out and replaced with a far more submissive wife.
I don't know if the audience heard my eye roll when Preston started talking about submissive wives, but there was a pretty big eye roll.
But that's the story. And it's not based on the biblical text, but it's an old story that has been told so often that it has found itself in popular culture, which has then reflected itself back onto how a lot of Christians actually look at their theology. So that's one example of pop culture affecting theology that I've observed.
Oh, that's a interesting one.
It is an interesting one, and it's interesting to dive into and look at. Or hell. The way most Catholics or even Protestants see hell is based a lot on the story of Dante Alighieri and his Divine Comedy.
Mm-hmm. Very good.
So those are the two examples I've got, and they're pretty cool. The Divine Comedy is a good read, but also, it's a time commitment. It's broken down into 3 consumable chunks.
And yeah, I mean, those are examples where it actually influences how we read scripture.
Mm-hmm.
Interesting.
I hope those answered your question.
I mean, it sure did.
Okay.
Now I'm just like pondering. I feel shook. Also, wasn't the Ascension of Mary like added after the fact by the Catholics?
Yeah,
Pretty
absolutely.
Sure. That wasn't pop culture though, because that was so old. I mean, I guess maybe it was influenced by pop culture, but that's when you mentioned Lilith and hell, I was like, what was added after the fact that people believe that's actually not in there at all, and that was one that.
So the question there is, how do you define pop culture?
I mean, I don't remember the date that the Ascension of Mary was added as canon.
It was after she died.
Very good. And before I was born. So that narrows it down.
Right?
About 1900 years. Thanks, Preston. I mean, I feel like we should put this other way. I would find pop culture as any media
that is popular
at the time. So I don't know enough about what was happening at that time to determine whether that was based off of pop culture or not, but I think it'd be an interesting thing to look into because I bet it was influenced by what was happening at the time.
It was the popular belief back in those days when this story came about that to be the mother of God, you therefore had to be sinless yourself, which became a problem when people started teaching that absolutely everybody is born deeply sinful. Mm-hmm. So there had to be this higher status given to Mary so that she could be a believable vessel to bear a sinless Jesus. Mm-hmm. So why is the word escaping me right
Immaculate.
now? The Immaculate Conception isn't the conception of Jesus.
Yes, I remember learning. This is like one thing that stuck with me from my time in university with religious studies is that
it's the conception of Mary.
Mary was immaculate. And immaculate, everyone, I don't know, it actually means untouched by man, big male man. So if your house is immaculate, it means your husband doesn't help you. Not just that it's pristine, it means untouched by a man. Immaculate. Yeah. Fun fact.
Because men are dirty and
Men are gross. Am I right? Sorry.
And so Mary had to be elevated to this higher status. And then the story, the Proto-Evangelion of James, tells the story of how Mary was conceived immaculately by a figure
Magic.
who not only bears the name Anna in the English translation, but straight up is a copy of the Old Testament Hannah, the mother of Samuel.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. Mary's own story is also very similar to Samuel's in the Old Testament. It's just copying older source material like we talked about before.
Before we turned on the mic, so that makes this really weird. But that'll come in an episode when we probably just talk about Jesus for at least an hour. That might be a two-parter, but
Could be.
I was
We'll
saying
see.
to Preston, this book that I'm reading, Jesus, Potter, Hit Christ, I thought would be more about pop culture, but it's actually about how the author argues that Jesus is a fictional literary character as opposed to historical, and that information for Jesus was borrowed by earlier writings, just like the Harrys and the Frodos of the world were borrowed from Jesus. So, Preston, what is some of your favorite Jesus-y pop culture, for lack of a better term? Because, like I said, there was going to be no way we could talk about pop culture as religion without religion in pop culture. So what are some of your favorite examples of religion in pop culture? And it can be anything. Like, I'm just going to toss out the Book of Mormon musical. Is amazing.
It's so much fun. I like that, though it addresses the theology of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, that's not what the story is about. It's about two missionaries who straight up make their own theology and really screw up any potential for teaching in Uganda, where the Church of Jesus Christ is not currently present, as far as I know, not at least on any official status. It is a pretty fun example of religion and pop culture.
Mm-hmm.
We had a lot of fun going to that show together.
Yeah.
My favorite.
I have a bunch.
There's so many little aspects of things that are all over the place in so many different media.
Absolutely.
What's coming to your mind?
Well, one of my favorite things to do, and this sounds so stupid, is I like to listen to the Jesus Christ Superstar soundtrack, which, if you haven't listened to it, it's an Andrew Lloyd Webber musical from the 70s, and it's like the last few days of Jesus. And then I'll listen to Book of Mormon, because then it's chronological. But it's like Jesus Christ Superstar is like very serious, and then Book of Mormon's not. But I listen to them both together and think about all my theology and for the day. I mean, if we're talking Christ figures, I've always been a big Harry Potter fan, literally just watching Lord of the Rings. I think those are probably my big ones. I had another point to make, but I'll let you tell me about some of your favorite examples.
My most ridiculous example was Hamlet II.
Okay. I've never even heard of it.
It's a ridiculous movie. I can't remember the name of the star. But basically the idea of the show is that this new theater teacher comes to school and says, I got this show plan that's really going to rock everybody's socks. It's a sequel to Hamlet. And I was like, but everybody died in Hamlet.
And I mean, I know it's been done very rarely, but it's rare that not the original author does, like...
Right? Like, the idea of a spiritual sequel is one thing, but this is straight up Hamlet II, meant to be a sequel to the original Hamlet.
Oh, dear.
Done 400 years later.
Oh, no.
As a musical. If I remember correctly. It's actually been a little
Musicals are always better.
I'm fairly confident it was a musical. And so everybody's dead. You have to bring them back to life. How do you do that? Bring in Jesus.
Oh, perfect. Jesus just resurrects everyone.
Yeah, and it just gets crazy. So that was a lot of fun.
I
wouldn't call it high quality cinema,
but a
but
good laugh
I would
for your
recommend it.
weekend. Okay.
It was some good fun. The opposite end of that spectrum, I would say you've got things like The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. Aslan is
Jesus.
absolutely Jesus.
Oh, well, C.S. Lewis is very open about that. He's apologist. And I don't mind Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe.
It's the only story in the series that I actually familiarized myself with, and I did enjoy it well enough, though it's weird that the kids walk into Narnia in a land full of sentient animals of all shapes and sizes, wearing fur, and nobody talks about it.
Anything. My problem book in the C.S. Lewis series was The Silver Chair. That one is like, have some religion shoved down your throat. And that one I actually struggle with. Read that one, like the entire thing is very preachy. I found this, and that's why I remember it, because there's a bunch of books and I couldn't list them all to you. I've only read the series once, but I remember The Silver Chair being very, very preachy. But I do enjoy The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe.
It's a good movie. Which is the only basis I have to judge the series on. I've never actually read any C.S. Lewis.
Oh.
I have Mere Christianity on my shelf. I've been meaning to read it for 10 years, and I still haven't gotten around to it.
Well, I'm going to assign it to you in a podcast
It's
outline.
not even a long book.
Well, one more question I want to address, especially to you as a religious person.
Mm-hmm.
And I have my own ideas for this, but as a non-religious person, I can't really answer it, is getting away with religion in pop culture, especially like really blatant examples of Jesus Christ Superstar, Book of Mormon. I have Lucifer here on the list, where you are dealing with canon and scripture. How do you not offend people?
What do you mean? Do I fail to offend people? Do I succeed in offending people?
Not you personally, Preston. You brat.
I'm sorry. I guess I don't understand the question.
Well, you're a member of the LDS Church.
Yeah.
Why are you not offended by the Book of Mormon? The musical, not the actual book.
Because I don't take it personally, I guess. Like there's one song, I Believe, which
Favorite song. I can
I've
belt that out right now. You don't want me to.
I've seen people use it as just a fun song to say, yeah, these are the things we believe. And the tone of it is a little mocking in some parts, particularly those parts that slightly misrepresent what we believe. But it's also sung by a fellow named Kevin, who that's what he believes. And though most of it reflects the general belief of the church, not all of it does, technically. I accept it as an expression of a fictional person's belief.
Interesting.
Constantine, the movie, not the TV show, that came out with Keanu Reeves like almost 15 years ago or whatever.
Yeah.
Perfectly enjoyable. There's a part in it that's like, well, in hell, Corinthians has a couple extra chapters or whatever. It's been a while since I've seen that too, but I remember that little thing. And it's just like, that's weird, because there's plenty of extra books in the Bible that could be added that aren't. Books that we know the Bible talks about that are no longer available. Things like that. Would have been easier to say, oh yeah, it's in these other writings of Paul, rather than saying, yeah, this epistle just had extra chapters that have been cut. It's kind of weird. But it doesn't offend me. But it does hit me as kind of weird. And Lilith being used, like I mentioned before, in almost every story that deals with hell and angels and demons, it doesn't offend me. It just, that's storytelling.
Mm-hmm.
In that universe, things are different. To think that all stories take place in the same universe I live in, it's just asking to be offended and have problems. But if you accept a thing as fiction, then everything's going to be just fine. That's the way I deal with it.
Is, I guess, then my follow-up question, and then maybe I'll go into my thoughts. Is there a point or place where pop culture could cross a line? Where, is there a way they could have done the Book of Mormon musical, for example, that you've been like, this is super offensive to everything I believe?
If they were...
I mean, and maybe if you can remove yourself a bit, because if you can separate people who can't separate themselves from that.
I think if something is deliberately defamatory, like the Book of Mormon talks about, or the Book of Mormon musical talks about how Joseph Smith found the plates and how he passed them off to Brigham Young and said, don't let anyone see them. I mean, that's straight up not true, but it's not presented as deliberately defamatory. It's presented from the point of view of a character who straight up has zero familiarity with his church's history.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you were to make that transition and to make the Book of Mormon musical about the coming forth of the Book of Mormon and make it straight up contradictory to all of the histories that we have available on that time, that would probably be offensive. But when it's told from the point of view of a completely ignorant figure, it's way less offensive.
Mm-hmm. Okay, perfect.
That's where I stand anyway.
No, and that was my thoughts, again, that I, can't say as a non-believer, but I have a friend who's quite a devout Christian. She loves Lucifer, but she's also said it's very accurate to Scripture. Obviously, Lucifer does not come to earth as a hot man, unfortunately. But every time they reference something biblical, it's accurate, and that's where she enjoys it. And when I first saw Lucifer, not knowing that much, I was like, oh, she wouldn't like this, but she enjoys it because it's accurate, and you just kind of confirm that, and because it's accurate, or accurate to the character, it's
like,
okay.
If in Lucifer, for example, where you have a figure living on Earth as this hot dude, imagine having Jesus show up, but instead of being like Jesus, he's like Zeus from the old tales in Greece. That would be offensive to people. Because that is straight up a misrepresentation of the character.
Yeah.
And biblically, we have very little detail on what the character of Lucifer really is. And presenting him in any sort of way that is attractive to people makes perfect sense based on his role, that it's not offensive.
And I mean, for the premise of the show, a good character to pick, right? You couldn't have done Jesus as a crime drama.
No, it wouldn't work. No. It wouldn't be interesting, I think.
Yeah.
I think it would straight up fail to be interesting.
There is that show I haven't seen on Netflix called Messiah. Have you seen the previews?
I've seen the previews for it. I've heard it's good.
Yeah. Anyway, that was a complete digression. But any final thoughts? Any bows you want to tie and wrap up this episode?
Religion is complicated. Don't be afraid to talk to your friends about it. And the things we've addressed, I think, are both fascinating and very deep wells to dive into.
These always are. If you have any thoughts or comments, our lovely congregants, that's what I'm calling you now, shoot us an email. Let us know what your favorite Christ figure is or example of religion and pop culture at, and it was wrong last episode because I hadn't set it up yet, holywatermelonpod, POD, @gmail.com. And leave us 5 stars on your preferred podcast player and subscribe and share it with a friend.
Peace be with you.
Christian prophecy fulfilled itself. God is near.